Welcome back as we continue to discuss the Heidelberg Catechism. This is Lord's Day number 2, and we continue to explore what we believe through these questions and answers of the Heidelberg Catechism. I don't know about you, but I'm glad the New Testament came along. That means that the law presented in the Old Testament, especially those first 5 books of the Bible, the 613 commandments that we have, is no longer anything we have to worry about, right? After all, Jesus and the disciples did work on the Sabbath, at least according to the Pharisees. We don't do animal sacrifices anymore. I don't think the food laws pertain any longer either. Jesus even boiled down the law to 2 simple commandments: to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. And that was the first and greatest commandment. The second was like it, to love your neighbor as yourself. He goes on to say that all the law and the prophets hang on these 2 commandments. That comes from Matthew 22, verses 37 to 40. I just want to follow these 2 simple commandments. Sound pretty simple, doesn't it? But if the law is really unimportant, like I've been joking about, why is the word law used 54 times just in the book of Romans in the New Testament? And most of the time when Paul, who wrote Romans, is talking about the law, he's referring to the Mosaic law given to the Israelites. In other words, those 613 commandments. And why did Jesus say this in Matthew 5, verses 17 to 18? He says, "Do not think I've come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have come not to abolish them, but to fulfill them. I tell you the truth, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished." It seems Jesus made the law tougher than it already was. The 2 commandments are just as tough to keep, if not tougher, than the 613. Right after that statement I just read from Jesus, he explains that murder is more than just the act of killing someone. It's the act of simply being angry with another person. You can't even call somebody a fool or it's a sin. I think I violated that one several times. And if you lust in your heart, you've committed adultery. And later he tells us that we're called to love our enemies. So all of the commandments in the New Testament, those 613, can be boiled down to these 2 real commandments: love God and love neighbor. If we can say that we are successful with these 2 commandments, then we're really accomplishing the law that's set forth in the Old Testament. I don't know about you, but I know that I don't, and I can't do those 2 commandments to God's satisfaction. It's even probable that even in the short time it took me to write this devotion and to record today's devotion, I violated one or both of those commandments, and maybe even multiple times. It seems impossible to keep the commandments, the law, even if it's just the 2, love God and love neighbor. So why do we even have the law? Well, to answer that question, let's look at 3 questions today for the week. Questions 3, 4, and 5 from the Heidelberg Catechism. Question 3 is this. Here's the question: how do you come to know your misery? The answer is, the law of God tells me. Question 4, what does God's law require of us? The answer is this. Christ teaches us this in summary in Matthew 22. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. This is the first and greatest commandment, and the second is like it: love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these 2 commandments. And question number 5, can you live up to all of this perfectly? The answer is no. I have the natural tendency to hate God and my neighbor. So the law exists to let me know I'm a sinner, to know my misery, as question 3 said. And once I know that, and know that I can't solve that problem myself, then I'll be pointed to the one and only way to solve the problem. But that's getting just a little ahead of the game. That'll come later in the Heidelberg Catechism. So for now, as painful as it is, let's just stop with the fact that the law tells me I'm a sinner, and with that law, I quickly find that I can't accomplish what's in the law. It shines a light on my sins. So now I recognize that I can't do anything myself about being righteous. Listen to these words from Paul in Romans 7, verses 15 to 24. Paul says, I do not understand what I do. For what I want to do, I do not do, but what I hate, I do. Does this sound familiar? It does to me. And if I do what I do not want to do, I agree that the law is good. As it is no longer I myself who do it, but it is sin living in me. I know that nothing good lives in me, that is, in my sinful nature. For I have the desire to do what is good, but I cannot carry it out. For what I do is not the good I want to do, no, the evil I do not want to do, this I keep on doing. Now if I do what I do not want to do, it is no longer I who do it, but it is sin living in me that does it. So I find this law at work. When I want to do good, evil is right there with me. For in my inner being I delight in God's law, but I see another law at work in the members of my body, waging war against the law of my mind and making me a prisoner of the law of sin at work within my members. What a wretched man I am. Who will rescue me from this body of death? In this passage, Paul points out the conflict that's in him and all of us, the conflict between good and evil, the conflict between holy living and sinful living. We have this conflict once we know what the law is. Once we know what the law is, then when we sin, we know it. But knowledge isn't enough. Paul says that he has the desire to do good, but still can't. Self-determination is not enough. Even recognizing God's law, there's still another law at work in his body and our body. So delighting in God's law is not enough. The conflict wages on. Paul calls himself wretched and knows that he can't rescue himself. There must be some other way to be saved. Paul's words for himself are words for us and all Christians as well. So this is about guilt, our guilt, knowing how sinful we are. Having this knowledge of our sinfulness is good and that it will eventually point us to the only way out. This ends the words for Lord's Day 2. But I have a postscript for you. I hate to leave things on a bad note. The only real good news for today is that we find out and we know that we're sinful from the law. We'll get to more good news later. But if you just have to know what the good news is now, then go ahead and read Romans 7:25 and Romans 8:1. See you next week for Lord's Day 3. Amen.